Hi, this is Marlene, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Go to MarlenePardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Strange Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing today? Good, I hope. I'm doing good. As you can see, I have my Stories of the Supernatural t-shirt, which is very confusing because I didn't realize when I had it printed that having it all over the place was like having a psychedelic trip back into the 70s or whatever. But anyway, I know people have been texting me about my chickens and the chicks. One small problem, besides it being rainy weather, right now for the last couple of days, we've been anticipating tropical storm / hurricane, then tropical storm Elsa, which came up the west coast of Florida. And luckily, where I live at, we've just gotten strong winds, but a lot of rain. And when it's been raining and then you get a lot of extra rain, bottom line, wasn't going to go out there to film the chicks. I mean, as it was, I had to have like a plastic tarp over where I kept them. Plus, for those of you who didn't see my show 2 shows, that's how I twisted my knee, was because I stepped in a big mud whatever, and I was like, and I didn't fall down, but I twisted my knee really bad, so I'm really, really careful around mud now. Incredible, but yeah. So I promise, as soon as the weather clears up just a little bit, okay, I'll be out there to video the chicks, which are really small because, like I said, this is from the little tiny bantam hen that got killed. So they're like 6 of them. The other 2 eggs of the 8, they haven't hatched. And I even put them under other broody hens and nothing happened, But that's what happens. Sometimes these eggs are not fertilized. But anyway, I've got 6 chicks, but they're really, really, really small like that. So, yeah. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. Oh, and before I forget, I do want to talk about a new sponsor for the show. Okay, this is a service. It's called Primary Notary. All right, and basically what Primary Notary does is, besides the actual, that obviously that they do notary services, is that they are a mobile notary services. And what that means, especially nowadays, is that with so many people doing, needing documents notarized, whether it's personal stuff or, if you're doing any type of mortgage, closing, refi, even automobile purchases that you need a mobile notary services, they go out. And basically is that they go out when you need it, where you need it, and they travel to your location in the state of Florida at a time that's suitable for you. They're fast, friendly, reliable, and above all, they're very professional, and they keep your privacy in mind. They can also assist you with immigration forms, virtual assistant services, title processing. They can officiate at your wedding. Again, they also have what's called remote online notary services, which means that you can get the notary service done online. You don't even have to do the face-to-face thing. Also, they have a bilingual staff, which are fluent, by the way, in both English and Spanish. All their notaries are background checked, certified, bonded, insured. They're available 7 days a week, available after hours, weekends, holidays, etc., because there's always somebody out there that, the 11th hour is when they need things done. But guess what? It's great when you can get somebody to actually respond. You can find them at primarynotary.net. email them at hello@primarynotary.net, or you can call them toll free at 844-423-7773. Again, that's primarynotary.net. Again, now let's get back to the best part of the show, which is I'm going to talk to you about my guest, and this is a first-time guest here on Stories of the Supernatural. This is a gentleman by the name of Duane Cerny, and I'm going to give you some bio information on him. By the way, I love his bio. He was awarded a poetry scholarship by Gwendolyn Brooks, the poet laureate of Illinois, and he graduated from Northeastern University into the economic downturn of the 1980s. Unemployment for a few years, he stumbled from one soon-to-be going out-of-business employer to the next and decided to try to fail in his own self-employment. He founded a legal word processing called On Disc. It was small, but surprisingly successful. Now, parallel to this company, he partnered with his musical muse named David Bell and created Persona Records. It's one of the earliest house music labels in the United States, producing legendary DJ Frankie Knuckles, vinyl releases, and licensing music via his own band, Danny Alias. To this day, Danny Alias is bootlegged throughout the world. Now, in 1988, he met Jeffrey Nelson, and together they set off on an antique odyssey. And from 1990 to 1998, he operated, along with Jeffrey, the Wrigleyville Antique Mall, as in WAM, W-A-M. It's a modern multi-dealer vintage stores in Chicago. They have tens of thousands of sales, countless fails, and the revelations of too many startling stories to tell in a single night of vintage debauchery. But we'll see how much we can get out of him. And he retells a lot of this in the book that he wrote called Selling Dead People's Things, where he documents a lot of the experiences he had. Now today, Jeff and Duane, they own the Broadway Antique Market, which is home to 75 top dealers. It's Chicago's largest multi-dealer shopping destination, and every bit the vintage department store we hoped it could become, as in that what they wanted. They're there for collectors of mid-century design. It's a mini modern mecca. For others, it's a fun place to idle away an afternoon, people watch, and or try not to buy something. And as for him, and I quote, "I'm older, not much wiser, creakier and crankier, and oh, my feet hurt. Thanks for asking, but yes, I still like to sell you a vintage chair. I'll sit later." How are you to welcome him? How are you doing today, Duane?
I am great, Marlene. Thank you for that.
I love your
introduction.
That thing about creaky crankier and my feet hurt. Yeah, I can identify with that. It's the other day.
I was going to ask how your knee is doing.
Let me tell you something. Believe it or not, somebody would have been watching me is what this lady doing dancing out in the chicken yard. And basically what I was trying to do is not eat it into, it was just like a big mud, and I didn't realize it just had been raining, and I did one of those, oh, no, and I twisted something in my knee.
Oof.
And it's little by little. I can't really put my weight on it, so like I look like Quasimodo going around like dragging one foot, but there's no help for it, and there's only so much ibuprofen you can take before it starts to affect your stomach. So basically,
right, yeah,
this is one of those things, But and then of course my other foot hurts. And people must be saying, "Oh, you shut up, Marlene." My other foot hurts because, of course, my other leg is because I'm overusing my right leg. So, yeah, such is life. But anyway, the human condition. What can I say? So anyway, Duane, you mentioned you've been doing this for years and years and years and years. And tell us what it's like to sell dead people's things, because that's really what it comes down to. Because I imagine a lot of your stuff comes from what, like estate sales and things like that.
Yes, and I certainly buy things from people who are above ground. But it's what's funny is I kind of stumbled upon that phrase. I would hear a number of like old time dealers refer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I sell dead people's things, and I always thought that's just it's a little vulgar.
But it's
accurate.
accurate.
Throw that out there. It's accurate. I mean, it's blunt, yeah. but it's accurate. And I always had that in the back of my head, going, "Gosh, that would just be the." Again, years ago, somebody said they wanted to open a store with that name, and I went, "Well, I don't know."
You're going to have a certain type of crowd show up for that.
Yeah, it's a little dark. It's a little dark. I always wanted to open up a store that was called Sold, which is everything in it is sold. You come in, there's nothing there. It's all sold.
So,
But so when I was playing around with the idea of, I've written a lot of different things over the years, but I never wrote about what I do.
okay.
And I'll tell you how the book came about. And I was able to get into a fantastic writing program in New York. 7 years ago, something like that now.
Okay.
And all the writing you did it right there, in this person's apartment, and everything had to be true.
Okay. All right.
And it was what was really cool about it was, she would say, like, you know what, write down the 5 most horrible things that ever happened to you, and then she would go around and she'd look over your shoulder and she'd say, okay, I want 10 minutes on that, and you would write about that.
Okay.
And there were some incredible stories that came out of it, which actually for your listeners would probably find it enjoyable, because there was a woman who insisted that she had been an alien abductee.
No.
Some really rare, I mean, wow, and some very, many of them very difficult stories too, about abuse and
Sure.
But I wrote a story about an incident that occurred to me at an estate. And I did it. I wrote it, and I did it, and everyone went, to use the expression, bullshit.
Oh, you're
You can't
kidding.
write fiction. You can't write fiction. This isn't a fiction class. And I said, no, I was there. My partner was there. We have another business partner who was there. This happened. And I failed. And I've been going every week. I've been doing really well in this class until I got to that story. And I said, oh my gosh, I finally write about what I do, and I fail. And so I went back to Chicago, and I rewrote this story 15 times just for myself. I was so angry with myself. And on a lark, I sent it into the New York Times, and darn if Michael Weinrib, who won a Pulitzer Prize, printed it.
That's
So
great.
and that was called Traces of a Man Who Disappeared. So if any of your listeners want to check that out, it's called Traces of a Man Who Disappeared. Google that. It's on their site and all over the place.
Okay.
And just a curious examination of a person's life, and that things, when you're going through the remnants of a person's life and what they collected and who they were, it's not always your first assumptions are often incorrect. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And it was a real learning experience for me. And I don't want to say too much about the story, because people will read it and you'll go, oh. And it's a bit of an O. Henry type story. So you get to the end and you're like, wow. I mean, it's really a kick in the head. It's an eye opener. And the response was tremendous. Some people were really upset about it, which was good. If you're a writer, you want to.
Yeah, you want some type of reaction, right?
Yeah, you want some kind of reaction, and some lovely letters from people, really like all over the world, emails from all over the world. And I was just shocked, and I just realized that as you look at the antique business, which tends to be, we all love the Antique Roadshow, absolutely, but it tends to be a little staid and kind of frumpy, and and it all comes down to like what. I always say like 95% of the books that are out there about the antique business are about identifying what something is and what it's worth.
Right.
And selling dead people's things is not that book. That I wanted to kind of dig deeper into it. I wanted to go that, when somebody's on Roadshow and they tell you the story that it was their great uncle who was in World War I and was almost killed, and then he came back with this piece of shrapnel that turned out to be, I don't know, something from Himmler. I don't know. There was always some strange story. You go, wow, that's fascinating. That always intrigued me. And then I realized, again, this is over the course of doing this for some 30 years, so not every estate I go to and it's a revelation by any means, or paranormal by any means.
Sure.
But every once in a while, I stumble upon circumstances. And it's kind of like letting the object tell the story, really. If I'm so fortunate, and then sometimes I can kind of pull things together. But it's funny when even in your introduction on this, I reference it in the book. In Pompeii when they were doing the excavation in Pompeii, they found an antique store.
Really?
There was an antique store.
I didn't know that.
When they were importing things from all over, the area,
Mm-hmm.
and people back then even wanted things from other cultures and other times.
That's very interesting.
So this business has been around for a long time, and I think I've turned a little bit of it on its ear, and I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, let me ask you, did that story that you wrote, was that the first time that you had something weird happen, or was that just one of the best stories? Because I know she asked you, what's the worst experiences you've had?
Right. No, I think I'm not really sure why I chose that one. It wasn't the first. It was probably in point of time. It is probably the most recent. Like it was at the top of my head.
Okay.
I thought, wow, that would be a good story. These people need to hear that one. Things had happened to me prior. The story in the book about how I go to this elderly lady's little apartment on Lakeshore Drive,
Mm-hmm.
and what that turns into. That had happened many years earlier.
Okay.
So I kind of reached into my bag, and for the book was really on one of like the strongest stories in there. And then it's a bit of a parallel, I guess, autobiography memoir, more accurate, which really wasn't my intent per se. Initially, I thought I'd put all these stories together, and then I had a wonderful editor, and they said, you should really weave this into what you do every day, and people might find that engaging. So it's a little bit of a business book.
Okay.
I know that might sound odd, but I believe it is, because it just shows you what it's like to start a business and fail and start and fail and keep at something.
Sure.
And darn it, every once in a while it works out.
Yeah,
So,
stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't include all that in the book, but I fell on my face many, many times, and I had minor successes with things that I didn't make any money at. The record business was one, but I was there to really at the beginning of something, and often at the very beginning of something, there really isn't a lot of money.
No, there isn't. There isn't.
There isn't.
But
very,
what people don't realize, and I know this sounds like, that's so trite, but the truth is that even when you fail, you learn something if you're smart. I'm not going to do that again.
Absolutely. I actually think you learn more from failure than you do from success.
Yes.
It's painful.
Yeah, it's like,
if nothing else, it's like, I'm not going to do that again.
No, of course. And I mean, even if you have a different type of business, you realize there's certain things that's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I already found that with that other business.
Yeah, but there are mistakes you can make that are just applicable.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. It's again my business partner, who's just is fantastic, but he was never an entrepreneur like I was, and am, and he's much more cautious of things because he hasn't fallen on his face as many times as I have. He's afraid like the next time he's going to fall on his face. Now I'm like, well, I'm just going to try it because, well, what can happen? Really.
What was it? That worst case scenario kind of deal?
Yeah, I mean, we're not suggesting people risk life and limb, but just on a lot of things. Yeah, I really encourage people, whatever it is that they want to do, try it. Put your toe in the water.
Sure.
And something like that. This book was turned down by 50, 60 publishers.
Are you serious?
I am serious. And it's gone on to be the -- antique and collectible book on Amazon twice. Not just once.
That's
twice.
Incredible.
USA and Canada in its fourth printing. It's carried in antique malls and antique stores all over the country. So not just bookstores, but antique stores sell it. So, and that's something I stumbled upon, a whole different way to market it and merchandise it, and actually dealers buy them from me.
Right. In other words, you went outside the bookseller or bookshop approach. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I did it, and because it's still as an independent title. But and I had an agent. In L.A. who was lovely, but she just couldn't place it, and she kept saying it's a TV show, and I said, well, it's not. It's a book. I want it to be a book.
At least at the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a great dream, and I think that was more her dream than mine. And it was like, it's a yeah. Anyway, because when as you read it, it's a collection basically of short stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I think where it's episodic, and I see where people want to go looking at it in terms of media. But I wanted a book, and I like to write, and that was this is an opportunity to write about what I do.
Yeah, which is great because that's what you know, in other words. And obviously, you have a passion for your business, for what you do, and it translates into the story, the experiences, which is what I was getting, after so many years. Let me ask you, did you ever, how's this? Was the first experience that you had that maybe you was like, was it when you went to some place or after you bought something and brought it back to your shop?
What would be the experience that
Right, that you had some experience that you're like, man, there's something's weird that's going on, or
okay. The first, I would say the first one, it was in I always call it in point of place,
okay.
in a residence and a circumstance. Later on, yes. But I would say much later on. And what's interesting about that, and actually we can kind of get into that now too, is that because I have a very big store, and upstairs, which I kind of knew at the time when I bought the building, but I really didn't think about it. Part of the upstairs had been an apartment after the war.
Okay.
After the war, it was really hard to find any kind of apartment, so they were turning everything into apartments. Well, that part of the store, lots of stuff goes on.
Really?
And I had felt it and didn't really want to make a big deal about it. Not everybody's happy with those that statement. I want people to go up there and shop and have fun and buy something. I don't want them to be scared. And then at first I just thought it was me, but over the years, and I've had this building now for 22 years, I've lost count of how many people have asked me. And it's interesting because what I think it is, I think I've narrowed it down to a couple different things. I've never had it professionally investigated.
Okay.
I'm not sure I want to, but oftentimes people feel that they'll say, "Oh, you have another employee upstairs," which I do not.
And you're like, no.
And that no, and they feel they're being watched, which is a very obviously a common experience.
Okay.
But I've also realized because it's an antique store, we have so many things come through there, so many things, and people have this. I totally believe this, and I just know it to be true. It's a fact that there are people who just kind of expend their energy into objects, and mostly it's because they love them.
Yes.
It's because they love them. It was a favorite thing of theirs. And there's just this so I feel generally it's a very positive thing, at least in my experiences with the store. And so they're kind of energized. It's what it is. I think it's very simple. And there are people who are rather sensitive or intuitive. Mm-hmm. Maybe they know it, maybe they don't. And that's when that connection is made, right there. It's a very personal thing. And so when I have a girl will come down and she'll say, "You have this mirror upstairs," and I'll think, "Oh, she wants to buy the mirror," and and she says, "Has anybody ever talked to you about that mirror? Where did that mirror come from?" And I had this, I think I had an experience. I think I felt something, or it's a photo, or it's a piece of furniture, or it's a little vase, and it tends to be obviously the more antique things. I've not stumbled upon too much mid-century modern haunted objects. That's not happened. But I easily 20 people who don't know each other, all just random. So that is not happenstance.
Right. From your perspective, like you said, these people are totally unconnected one to the other. It's like they didn't go upstairs on all these sides, plus different times. Have you ever had one piece that everybody that you're like, okay, is anybody else going to come and tell me something about this piece?
Well, I have a story in the book about the death, and that's a bit of a long story. Give it briefly. Was just that goes back to Wrigleyville for in our first store.
Okay.
Is that I had this desk which had come in. I mean, a guy brought it to us, which was odd because usually we're going to someone's home. But the guy brought this desk in, and the people understand what it was. It was rather a folk art desk, which means somebody actually made it. And then, so it wasn't a mass-produced thing. It was an individual, an artist that made this desk. And I'm going to say, we'll be kind, turn of the century, 1890, something like that. Small. It's a small desk. But it was a partner's desk, which means you could sit on either side of it. So the drawers would open through. You could pass through things through the drawers. And really unusual desk. And in the bottom of all the drawers were these wood-burned symbols. Every drawer had all on the bottom of the drawers, and depending how you put them in, and you couldn't. I always, and again in the book, I call it as like it was like pig Latin.
Okay.
It was, what is it? What language is this? It was just symbols. It made no sense to me, to anybody else. Well, so the first thing that happened with that desk is it was down in the basement, which is not a dusty basement. It's a very modern, clean basement where we would sell furniture. And I had two employees down there who actually, which I think is the point of the story, they did not get along. These are two guys that really did not like working together. And one afternoon, like a Saturday afternoon, they both come running up the stairs, screaming, just screaming. And about that, some of the drawers had opened and little balls of light had come out and were bouncing all around the room. Now, this is a basement. There are no windows.
Right.
There are no windows. There's no light. There's no light source there for that to happen. And again, weird because these are two guys who wouldn't agree on lunch. You know what I mean? They wouldn't agree on anything. Yeah. They could not be more different. And one of them quit after it.
Really?
Now, this desk I would sell 3 times. So the first 2 times, people brought it back.
What?
And yeah, so, and it would be, I don't want this desk. Can I have my money back?
And what would they tell you? Did they tell you why?
No, they did not want to say anything, which is a sign right there.
Yeah.
Silence is an answer.
Yeah. Yes.
No, it was, I want my money. Well, yeah, if you're going to return something too, I want my money back. That's really the topic, right? And you know, that's why I'm still in business. I work with people. That's fine. It didn't work out for you. I don't want. Take your desk back.
Right.
Right. Fine. Oh, okay, fine. So they comes along. I'm down in the store, and my manager calls me, and she says, "Oh, there's this lovely woman here, and she wants the best price on the desk." And I'm like, "Sell that desk. You need to sell it. You need to sell that desk. This desk needs to go." And how I tell the story is from her point of view and the correspondence that I had with her afterwards. Because finally somebody was like, buys this desk. The same thing happens to her and her husband, and it could get a little odd because it went from just the light to then the drawers would just come out. Or they'd come in the room and the drawers would be pulled out. Okay. And they'd be like, "Did you open the desk up?" No, I didn't touch it. And and then they come back in and sometimes they'd be closed when they had left them open. So it was that kind of stuff. So she contacted me with, what do you know about this? And of course I'm like, you can bring the desk back. My first response is, just bring the desk back.
You're thinking, yeah,
I've
done this before.
Here it comes. Here it comes. And she said, no, you don't understand. I love this desk. My grandmother had a partner's desk similar to this. I'd be looking for a desk like this for years. No, I don't want to bring it back. But what do you know about this desk? And all I could tell her was what I just told you now. How I got it and the issues that I had with it, and that it was just, the writing on it was inexplicable. And it seemed to be that in the correspondence that I had with her, not recently, but after this, she just kind of accepted that this was part of what it did and what it was, and it needed to be just accepted. And then she didn't have as many incidences once she just kind of accepted it, as that's what it wants to do. And I felt it finally found its home, that it was clearly wanted some attention, but it was probably one of those haunted objects. And again, I have to do all this secondhand, but this is multiple people. 5 or 6 people.
Right. And I know what you're telling me, plus your employees that come running out of the basement.
Employees.
Yeah, that's your first giveaway.
going with that. And I did believe them mainly because it was such an unusual piece.
Okay.
You know, if this was like a sofa somebody bought from Sears, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't. But this was such an unusual, and again, the fact one person made this, and it must have taken hundreds of hours to do. I wish I had photos of the bottoms of all these drawers. Just the woodwork was all burnt into it. It was phenomenal. It was gorgeous. It should have been in a museum. But I think this person who my guess is whoever had made it was just so passionate about it, and part of him or her was just still there.
Sure.
And wanted it to be, it's like don't put me in a fireplace.
Let me ask you something. How old would you guesstimate that piece was?
Oh, easily turn of the century.
Really?
Prior
okay.
Century. Yeah, 1890, 1910.
Mm-hmm.
So it had an arts and crafts look to it, but it was really more folk art, which is different.
Mm-hmm.
In that there's mass-produced arts and crafts, but not folk art. That was just a one-of-a-kind
Right,
piece.
right. That's what I was getting at. That whoever, this wasn't like a factory-produced,
No.
and personal
and
kind
like
of thing.
But a couple things, kind of winding back to it, was after the writing class, I realized there was a different way to tell the story.
Okay.
And so when people read the story in the book, and it's rather an involved story, there's a little more details in it, but it gives you the Reader's Digest version of it. But it's a different way to tell the story. Those are still the facts of how they occurred.
Right.
But I still get it as a retailer. This is just, for someone calling saying, I'm calling you up, but I'm not bringing this item back. So, and this is funny because her husband kept saying, well, then what are you complaining about?
Right. I was going to say, what did she wanted to make sure,
Well, here, she's asking the same question you're asking. Now, what was this about? Right? Why? What? And we don't. These things are, title of the book, inexplicable.
Right.
There some things there aren't answers to them, and maybe we wouldn't even want to know.
Right. In other words, you didn't find a hidden note in one of the drawers that said this was made by and then that's the end of the story.
But strangely enough, perhaps somewhere someone can transcribe what is written on the bottom of all those drawers.
Sure.
So actually, there is kind of a note. It almost seemed like a story that's written on that, but there was almost like hieroglyphics.
Right, and the reason why I also asked you is that I imagine that sometimes, like you said, especially somebody with your expertise, I know that this type of desk, for example, was manufactured from this year to this year, and usually it was by this either this craftsman or this factory. You know what I'm saying? You narrow it down.
Totally. Oh, no. I could say, this was Stickley. Stickley did this in 1910 to 1915.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm no expert either, but just generally. But again, it's different with
you never know. Maybe
art.
some writer poured out their soul on it, and it wasn't the manufacturer; it's the person that was
could be, or
it.
just it's a kind of a just a frustrated craftsman. Actually, probably a frustrated writer. So I'm just going to write my story on the piece of furniture that I made.
Yeah, it's like
But it was a fantastic piece of furniture. I think it's an interesting story.
Let me ask you: Do you ever? I want to ask you this question, since you said that this desk was brought in by somebody.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever brought something to you, or same thing? You go to visit someplace like an estate sale that you've seen a piece, whatever it is, and when you see it the first time, it's like wow, and then when there's something just off of it, and you just the vibes are not right. Or are you going to be the businessman, which is what it sounded like? You're going to be the
well, there was a piece that came in, and it was from it's a little disturbing, but and sometimes they are. He was in a courtroom. He was a sketch artist in trials,
right.
and very very talented man, and very intriguing pieces of art. I mean, really for having very little time. I'm guessing he probably did these very quickly and then later on kind of fleshed in the colors and whatever. They were really well done. But on the backs of them, he would put what the trial was about.
Oh,
and those were very very disturbing.
I bet.
Because it was, the one that I ended up with was because I liked the art. I didn't really look at the back of it, and it was about the death of a child,
Right.
The murder of a child,
Okay.
and by, I think it was the father,
Mm-hmm.
just abuse, and I still have that piece.
Right, because people don't realize they don't allow cameras during the trial. So
No, exactly, yeah. Again, not that the piece isn't well done; it absolutely is. But I mean,
mm-hmm.
if this was this man's art, and he's reporting,
Yeah,
I mean, it
this
really
was
is.
his job.
It's news.
Yes.
And this is a thing from the I'm going to say it's from the late '60s.
Okay.
Early '70s, something like that. So it has some age, but that was one where I didn't realize what it was until I probably wouldn't have bought it. And again, that's not a paranormal thing; that's just a
Your preference.
life thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then I've had people bring in things that were just horribly inappropriate.
I can imagine you
and
must
then
have seen some things come in.
just that. Well, I had a guy come in one time and he had a pail, a bucket,
Okay.
and he brings out all these little brass photos with covers on them, right? And a whole pile of them. Well, I mean, instantly I knew, well, these are what people would have on the tombstones in cemeteries, and where you lift up the little brass
Oh yeah,
lid,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's
yeah. I know what you're
a
talking
photo
about.
of
That you
someone there.
swivel off.
Well, so I'm not saying, and I'm not saying he did it, but someone went through and just defaced the cemetery, for God's sakes.
Okay.
And it was, I just said, get out. I mean, I would never buy. No.
Right.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Put them back. Oh, I just thought of this. Maybe he did. I don't know.
That's a whole lot of stuff to.
So. Yeah, and I mean they are beautiful, but they're beautiful. They should remain right where they were. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. And people, have looted cemeteries for decades, but there are things that come in and you just no.
Well, recently I was writing an article, and one of the things that involved was part of it was James Mansfield, and later on, and I didn't know that this was not an antique shop, but it ended up in a company. They closed down by now. The out in Hollywood called Dearly Departed. They would do two tours, and they had like a museum.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up with James Mansfield's car. Okay.
Yeah.
Which was totally crashed, and supposedly even had some type. They were saying it was her blood, but whatever. And they had it. She got killed in the '60s, and it was like 50 years later. And I was like, man, I hate to say it. I know for some people the morbid stuff is attractive, but at the same time, when you start really thinking about what took place with it, you're like, hey, okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are, and I don't appreciate these things either, but I mean, there are serial killer museums.
Oh yeah.
And there's collectors for there's a lot of kind of, I'm generalizing, but I have young people come in and ask sometimes, and it's always in a kind of a goth way.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it. It's almost in terms of like a fashion,
right?
To have something that's Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy or whatever. And people ask because both of those are regional, to Chicago,
right?
Both those stories. So they'll be, you ever get anything? And no, and I don't want to, but people collect some. They're pretty strange things.
Yeah, it's like, nah, everything's been bad. I'm sorry. It's like, how many personal items do you think these serial killers had, by the way?
That's right. But like Jane Mansfield's death car, yeah.
Right, that was like, I didn't know that. I was like, whoa.
James Dean's death
the
car.
Little bastard, yeah.
Yeah.
They don't know where that's at. That disappeared, and I don't think it ever surfaced again, did it?
No, that's interesting. But again, in these moments of sudden death, I can certainly see residual things happening.
Sure.
I think that's one reason that they do. You know more about that than I do, but yeah. So just even say with the estates I've been, it's some of them really. It's how recently something has happened or not. Because I've gotten into places there's a chapter in there about the Edgewater Hospital, and and I got in there in, I don't know, around 2000, 2005 or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
that was a place that had, a 100-year history, because it started as a hotel, like a very upscale hotel, and then it kind of fell into disrepair, and then this doctor buys it as a private hospital, and he was very successful with that for a while, and then his business kind of lessened, and it fell in disrepair. And that's a place of just, and I understand now I think there's a whole podcast series on the Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. Right. But I was in there very early. And here, wasn't there anything paranormal. I'm
yeah, right. You were just
trees and desks and coat trees and chairs and tables with chrome. You always think all those medical places, they had all that chrome furniture.
Yes.
From the 50s, all that chrome furniture with the kind of it's sticky vinyl upholstery. Yeah. Okay, well, I sell that. That's what I sell. And it's actually kind of deco looking, but that place was definitely, you got the vibe no matter where you were in it. It was the middle of summer, and it was so cold in there. That's the one thing I remember. And then I mentioned a couple other things that happened there, and that's a story in and of itself. What I like about, if I may, is that some of the things I write about, if people are interested in it, Google it. There's more stuff out there about. This is just my experience, in a public place like that, at least. There's so much out there. So I think I add a little color to it because, again, I was there fairly early, into it. And one of one reason I mentioned it is when even the title of the book, I said Vintage Fails. And people said, what's a vintage fail? And the vintage fail is the thing you didn't buy, the thing you should have bought. And there was the painting of the gentleman who owned it as a hospital. And there was this fantastic painting in the lobby that I could have bought that afternoon. I could have. I didn't even ask about it, mainly because I was so spooked and I wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, I'm not taking that home.
I'm not. But in retrospect, that's a vintage fail. I absolutely should have bought that because that person's presence was so clear. Yeah.
Let me ask you, do you come across a lot of these properties? And in recent years with this show about the hoarding, people don't realize that there's people out there that are hoarders, like ugly hoarders, and then there's other people that I call nice hoarders in the sense that they're very methodical and very organized, but they hoard. Have you ever come across any properties like that where it's like...
Oh, absolutely, yes. Then there's the ones I also call high-end hoarders, where there's like actually lots of nice things there. There's just so much that you can't even move. And those are good. Those are good. Okay. But again, when you're dealing with, you always say this is a business of relationships. And when you're dealing with the person who's still there and they know they need to downsize because they're going to get evicted or whatever. Right. Just like the show, very stressful. Yeah. And they don't want to part with anything. Yes. And oftentimes it's not even about the money. You can be offering them good money for things. And they're like, no, you don't understand. I found this in...
Yeah, they know the story behind everything.
Everything. You're like...
Yeah, they do.
And I'm a story guy. I'm interested in stories. It needs to be a good story.
Yeah.
Yes. But to the opposite of again, there's actually a little story in the book about and it was a woman who was from what everyone said, it was just very, very sweet. And it wasn't that she was a hoarder per se, but she took in a homeless person that she'd met on the street and felt bad for him. Okay. And he came in, and he was the hoarder. And he proceeded to fill up her house with just garbage, just everything, because he lived on the street, and that's what he knew. Yeah. I'm not judging. That's just what people have to do.
Right, no, you see them. You see them in every city that they push along these carts.
The carts, and they'll pick, later on, I'm going to need that milk cart. I don't know. They've got it. But so that, and then because he needed money, he started breeding pit bulls in her basement.
Oh, my God.
And that was then the end of the house, and it was really really nice Chicago
Oh my
bungalow,
God! What,
nice
she
area of
that would.
town. And then she passed, and then we're in there, and that was kind of a hazmat situation, in that when we show up, we were given booties to put over our shoes,
Oh,
and well, and what's funny is masks, which we were wearing masks well before COVID.
let me ask you a thing.
In the
How
antique
long was
business.
he in there? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, he was. It doesn't take long.
No, I
but
know
I'm
that.
gonna say I'm gonna say a couple years.
Let me tell you. You know that saying, "No good deed goes unpunished."
Oh,
Boy.
God, my mother used to say that all the time. But Marlene, you were just walking on garbage. I mean, you're just walking on it. And the people who were there doing the clean out had shovels,
Oh,
and they would shovel this stuff, and then we would go through that. Which even now I look at it, that was just so unhealthy and risky of us to do. But then there's a piece of really anything of value. I think he had taken.
okay.
So there was very little, any kind of textile or clothing is ruined in that. I mean, we think we found some couple of pieces of costume jewelry, and as I say, sometimes the only thing I come out of these places with is a story.
Right. Which,
and
yeah, people don't realize that hoarding. Yeah, you take it up wherever you go.
yeah.
No.
And yeah, I think about that place so often because it was just one of the worst hoarding situations. Oh, what was there? There was some kind of animals in the attic, a possum
Possums,
and
yeah.
her babies, and so we had to stop so that we get the service people to come and catch the animals and then let them out into the woods. It just but I have there's another story. Not that it's a hoarder story, but
Right.
it's actually the animal rescue story. That I get a dog and a bird and all these. So this is an interesting business. I always say I
was
going
going
to
to tell you, see, this is the kind of stuff that because you do this for a living, if everybody thinks that where you go to is these estate sales where everything is like in its place, but I'm sure you find situations that you're like, okay, do I really want to go in here?
It's you too. Yeah, absolutely. Every day is an adventure in that respect. And then we clean it up, and then it's put in a showcase, and it's presented to you. I think it's funny when people come and say, "Oh, there's dust here," and I'm going, "You have no idea what it took for us to get dust."
Yes.
Seriously, dust.
Yeah.
To get this piece here, but I don't really look at it, and a lot of antique dealers. I'm friends with a zillion people here in town and in New York, and many of us feel that this is almost like you're rescuing something.
Yes.
And that was like that it's a puppy or a kitten.
Yes.
That when you're giving something that really would have been lost, and you're giving it another life, and it goes on into somebody else's life. I mean, this is the ultimate recycling business. There's nothing greener than the antique business. And I think over the last couple of years, especially with younger people, they totally get it.
Okay.
Totally get it. The landfills are filled. We don't need to be doing any more of that.
Oh, let me tell you something. And I tell everybody, when you're a little bit older, there didn't used to have to be so many storage spaces before.
Oh my gosh, no.
You would hear somebody maybe storage if they were moving, but this was a very rare thing.
Oh,
now you got a storage unit, one of those storage unit buildings, just about every corner.
Yeah. It's a huge business.
It is, and if you think it's just because people are in transit, no, there's people that already have a home.
No.
And they have a storage space also.
Well, and look, there's half a dozen storage shows on TV.
Right.
I'll tell you this: I don't think it's any secret, but maybe people don't know. And I'm not saying all of them, but we've propped TV shows and movies, and we've probably done 200 films over the years. And we've got a whole bunch of things we're doing this week for shows that'll be coming out like on Netflix. But we've been approached by storage shows just to prop out those units, those storage units, which we would not do. I would not. So when they want to rent things to put in. So
well, no, but
coming
back to that, you were saying that sometimes people there's so much stuff in that they get, and it's not even, it's because they're quality, and then it's like before, you just had enough as unless you had a hoarding problem. I'm talking the typical person. Basically, you had what could fit in where you lived, whether it was an apartment or a house
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Right.
And maybe if you wanted to get a new piece, you'd get rid of an old one and move stuff around, and that was it. Or stuff got broken. But if
Right.
somebody would have told you, hey, by the way, one of the best businesses there's going to be is that you're just going to have empty warehouses where people will pay you money every month, sometimes for years,
Mm-hmm.
to store
Mm-hmm.
things there
Yeah.
forever and
Yeah.
ever. And you're like,
Yeah. And then generally, let's be honest, it's crap. Because if it
yeah,
was things that you really liked and needed, it would be in your home.
of
These are
course.
things you needed another blow up beach ball and
Oh, yeah.
your third lazy boy recliner, or whatever it is.
Yes.
I mean very often, and I don't I shouldn't say that I rarely get anything from a locker. If I do, it's because someone's called me up and said, hey, I have a dining room set that I
Mhm.
bought from you 10 years ago, and now I'm moving and I need this. Would you buy it back from me?
Right.
That's happened to me.
Sure.
But yeah, huge business. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well,
But there's a lot.
you know what, and I hate to say, because you mentioned that thing about a lot of these storage programs. They make it sound like there's treasures everywhere,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
No, that gets into what part of reality TV is
Yeah,
real.
yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
some of it, but I'm being kind.
I know.
Because something like that. Well, there was because we turned down things, and that was something we turned down. I said, I'm not doing that. That's just participating in a fraud, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
But, and there's plenty of other decent productions that come along, and generally the prop people there, they work so hard. Oh my gosh, I'm always just amazed. People have no idea what it takes when you're looking at something on TV. To talk about just the time and effort to create just that.
Oh yeah, just
shot,
for
just
either
that
a half an
scene.
hour or whatever.
Yeah, or 30 seconds.
Mhm.
We did a Dairy Queen commercial a couple weeks ago, and I mean it was just very involved.
Wow, Dairy
I mean,
Queen.
why would it not be? It's a business.
Yes.
But I love the fact that media is now reflecting more vintage. They're showing more vintage,
Mhm.
and then I mean, as your listeners will watch TV, look for things, and you'll see
Let me
these
ask you
aren't
something.
things they got from. Yeah.
Have you done it for movies, like for props, for films like
Oh,
that?
we've done 200 films. We wrote Road to Perdition.
Really?
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, that's right.
Only
That's-
the Lonely. I mean, I'm going back. We
Yes.
did Oprah's first foray into scripted television, which is called Brewster Place. I think it only lasted a season or two. I got things for. We sold Oprah a custom-made kitchen set that sat 24 people. So those
You know what? You don't
dinettes?
find that
You've
often
seen
anymore,
it.
do you?
Well, a custom one you don't. You don't
I
even
mean,
find
for
you
that
don't
many
even find
people,
the
that's
villas.
seating for that. That's
24
incredible.
custom made, and then they put it in a bowling alley for one of her reading groups.
Mhm.
When Oprah had those reading groups,
Right.
So I mean, we go back. And again, we did two last week, two big shows. We did Fargo. We did almost every season of Fargo.
Okay.
That's been shot here. Anything that's shot in Chicago, they're going to come through. I mean, other people do too. There's plenty of other places
Right.
that they rent from, but we're a major source for these things and have been. And also like a lot of really lousy movies. I'm naming some good movies, but we did remember the Chucky movies, the little crazy little doll that was running around. Yeah, we did this. Yeah, we propped out stuff for. And then people say, "What was there?" I don't even remember. It would be like a rug that Chucky sat on. He's
Right.
there on the floor, sitting on a rug. Yeah.
Right. They're trying. Yeah, they're trying to relate all these sequels or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's the lamp in the back. Remember that scene?
Yeah.
So, and then some clunkers, some things that have never been released. Yeah.
That's great. That's so interesting because,
Yeah.
Let's say that movie that you mentioned, Road to Perdition. We're here talking Prohibition, and there's like you like you said, there's a certain flavor that you want to portray when you shoot this movie, and you think absolutely everything that's there. It's not just the actors or the clothing; it's the everything.
Yeah. And that there's scenes there where a number of them were shot in a mansion in Evanston, right off the Northwestern campus, and everything went there. And those were just for those scenes. Gosh, know. I think we rented them a sofa. It's just kind of these
Yeah.
things come back to me in flashes here. But and also, you know, I kind of now understand why a movie costs $100 million,
Oh yeah, those
because
budgets. Like, what did they
the
do with all that
budget
money?
of just for all, you know, all this stuff. We did almost all the John Hughes films, and
Really?
John Hughes was lovely. And in that, and sometimes we got to meet these people, and sometimes we didn't. We didn't. But John Hughes would buy everything,
Okay.
and then at the end of the production, he would have an auction of
Really?
all the props, and then he donated all the money.
Oh, that's nice.
He would have
That's
he had like a specific charity that he created
Yeah.
that was so it was great because he got Hollywood to cough up this money to buy this
that's a
stuff.
great idea, though.
Because it was, yeah, and he's really one of the few people that would do that. Some of them would buy things and then they try to sell it for more money so they can make money to pay for the clunker of a movie that they made, you know, and that doesn't work out. But and then of course a lot of them rent. But I found though recently they tend to buy things because oftentimes they need to reshoot scenes,
Right.
and you don't need to come. You don't need to go, well, rent that thing back, and then I sell it, and then they need it again.
It's
So
like, nah,
like,
yeah.
oh,
It's,
no,
that
it's better
is-
just to keep it. Yeah. That's a whole other, you know, side business. I mean, there's a number of, again,
That's so
people in
interesting.
town that do this. But Chicago's a big, until 9/11, it was gangbusters. And then after 9/11, most of the productions went up to Canada, and it took a number of years for them to come back. And
Right,
of
yeah, I
course,
know what you mean.
you know, COVID shut things down, but now it's opened up again, gangbusters. So we're just busier than ever.
I was in Chicago like 2005, 2006. My son went into the Navy, and he was training, you know, at the base that's right there north of Chicago. That's the big
Yeah.
Navy base. So he
Yeah.
did his boot camp there, and you know, I went in there to see him graduate because, of course, he did it right, fresh out of high school, and he was my youngest kid, and I was like, yeah, all right, you know, things that children make you do. But anyway,
Yeah,
and so I went to Chicago,
mom, good mom.
and then right after he came out of, you know, and we had a chance to like walk around like the downtown area, which is beautiful. And then, of course, right after he finished boot camp, he finished right in time to come home for like the Christmas holiday, and he went to play soccer with his friends and broke his ankle. So, Mom on New Year's Day had to fly with him back to the base because he was on crutches. And that was my second visit to Chicago.
No.
It was great. I tried this great Philly sandwich, but yeah. But
Yeah, you need a better trip than that.
Yeah, I know. But
I
and we
come to
went
Chicago,
along
I
that
promise you a
road
better
that goes along the shoreline. What is it?
right.
Lakeshore Drive.
Sheridan Road, Lakeshore
Yeah.
Drive and Sheridan Road. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
we did that drive, which is beautiful because we did it like in November.
And then coming up from that far north, you would come back through all those mansions.
Right.
And Kenilworth and Winnetka. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
There are some. It's one of my favorite things. I mean, I'm like, there was a Warhol line that, you know, I'd show up for the opening of a door. You know, you know, in that I'm always if something's open, if there's a place I can go to, I want to see it. But you know, oftentimes it's these little cramped apartments or little houses. But if I can get a chance to get into a giant apartment or a huge
Right.
mansion, I get all excited. I really enjoy the architecture of it. And again, they're
Yes.
old. These are all old houses.
Oh yeah, I
And
imagine
so.
so.
Old houses, so they're just big antiques to me.
Exactly.
And even, I mean, here in Chicago, I live in a building that was built in 1927, and in 29, at the crash,
Right.
they offered 50-year leases if you just stay here. 50-year leases.
Wow.
And but you know what? That was brilliant because so from 29 to 79, it stayed in families.
Yeah, I
It
bet
stayed
it
in
did.
multiple generations of families. And then 79, 80, it went condo. But the building then was kept up.
Yes.
Where there are other buildings that did not do that of that same
Yeah, but
age.
it was
And
like basically owned in a way.
Yes, yeah, it was a huge commitment. I mean, this was when this place opened in 27. It was the most expensive rental building in town. Like politicians and baseball players, you know, lived here, and I remember as a kid going past this building, going, "Oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine living here," and now I do.
There you
But
go.
yeah, I love that space. That's really
Yes.
my point. Is just that, you know, and I you know, just encourage your listeners to it. So it's like you get an opportunity to get into an old house just to walk through it.
Yes.
Do it.
Yes, of
That
course.
might not be there, a year from now. I mean, they're
Yeah,
tearing
yeah,
things
yeah,
down
yeah.
left and
They,
right.
they, yeah, when before I moved to where I moved, because I moved in the last few months, I lived in a 100-year-old farmhouse down in Homestead, which is like the agricultural belt of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, and I was able to dig up, thankfully, because now there's so many newspapers that you can do it online. Because if I had to do it, I found the original owners and how they had come from Ohio, and basically they were growing oranges, and we bought it from the guy. He sold it. The gentleman died, and his wife died, and then his kids, because he had like 30 acres out there. They subdivided. They sold it, and eventually his great great grandson bought it, which is who we bought it from, and he lived there like 20 something years. And he
Wow.
redid it. He really redid it because it's these old wooden farmhouses. People don't realize that after a while you got to really stay on top of that. These properties, if not,
Oh,
they'll
sure.
deteriorate. So we were
yeah,
lucky.
absolutely.
He bought the house in '92 when Andrew came through. He bought it just in
Mm-hmm.
time to get plowed by Hurricane Andrew. So he kind of didn't have a chance, but he
No.
really renovated it nicely inside with the wood, and it had what they call South Dade pine. And we
Mm-hmm.
lived there. We lived there for like 11 years, and then I moved up here to where I'm at right now. And this little town, it's been around since the 1880s. It's called Citra. And I've dug up every once in a while. We've been digging, and I'll find bottles and stuff like from 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that modern garbage disposal, like pickup.
Mm-hmm.
It's not it wasn't always around, in other words.
No, it really didn't exist. Not in the
So a lot of
modern,
people would end up burying
contemporary.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
People don't think that you think, man,
yeah,
because everybody's so used to, well, you put it in your garbage pail, or your
yeah.
whatever, and then
Oh,
yeah.
and are there the bottle collectors?
Yes,
Go on
exactly.
Facebook. Oh my gosh, the bottle
Right,
collectors.
right. And
No,
it's like every
that's
once in a while I'll
totally
go,
a
oh,
thing.
what's that?
Well,
And
people say, where does this stuff come from? Somebody dug it up. That's where it came from.
yeah,
You dug some of it up.
yes,
Right.
yes. And
It's right
like I
there.
said,
It's right there.
people don't realize that disposing of a lot of these items, it's not like it wasn't always like that.
No, no.
We what was it? When we were bought the property, they had they had like an old pole barn, and we got somebody. We said, look, and it had kind of collapsed. And we had somebody come in and they say, look, you need to take that all away, all this debris, and everything. He found an Indian motorcycle in there.
Wow.
I
Wow.
was like, I was still in Miami. I hadn't come down, because we would go back
well,
and
that's
forth.
a mortgage payment.
And I was like, he calls me up and he goes, guess what I found? And I was like, what did you find? He goes, 11 vacuum cleaners. And I'm like, okay. And an Indian motorcycle. Now, you ask me, what would somebody need with 11 vacuum cleaners? I have no idea. But yeah, it was
But
like,
an Indian motorcycle, lots of people want that.
yes. And then, we discussed,
Yeah.
and he was like, but I was like totally unprepared because I thought it was just going to be like household junk, stuff
Right,
like people.
right. Yeah.
And yeah, people
Well-
don't realize that's. Yeah.
But that's what I do. It's just like, yeah. Here's. How about some exercise equipment? No. How about a vacuum? No. And then somebody pulls something out, and you go, oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's incredible. You'll have people that they'll keep junk, and then I'm sure. God, I'm sure you were aware of this. Amidst the junk, they have this couple of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
oh,
it
you
can
got
be the
that?
It could be the most surprising thing too.
Yeah.
It could be it can really almost be anything. It's
Yes.
just kind of strange.
Yes.
But
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
I
well,
wouldn't.
isn't that-
And sometimes, like you said, they have it. They have it not because they realize exactly the vintage or the antique value. They just have it because they like it, or maybe their grandmother gave it to them and they just kept it and whatever.
Yeah,
and
yeah. And well, I had a we were in really a clean out, and the woman who was doing the sale there was what were they? Person had 500. I'm being kind. 400 or 500 owls.
Holy
Owls.
owls.
So owls. So ceramic owl. It's a candlestick. It's an owl lighter. An owl.
Okay.
It's just most figural, most ceramic. But there were carved owls of that. And honestly, she just kept begging me, you need to buy these owls. Now, and I like collections. Collections are important. I always say, you get one thing, you go, you get three, well, that's interesting. You get a dozen of them together, they kind of become something else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what that is. I'm sure there's a word for it. But you almost put, 10, 12 of something together, and you go, oh, well, it's now a collection. One isn't a collection. Three is a collection. A dozen is a collection. And I went, and she gave me a really good price, and I said, I'm going to regret this. I sold every one of those owls.
And you're like, man, if I would have known.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? To this day, it happened about 4 or 5 years ago. To this day, I have people come in and say, do you have any of those owls?
Yeah. And it's because probably they're one of a kind. Either they're not manufactured anymore.
Oh, yeah. And the thing of it was is that I just put them in a case all together, just like they were, just like the collection, how it was showing them, going like, and say, this was someone's collection. Now, unfortunately, there's interest in owls, clearly, and flamingos or certain things, alligators. But, it's bears, but turtles. But I should stop. But but there'll be things that aren't. To want to be clear, someone has I don't know, armadillos. I don't have anybody asking for armadillos. Elephants, of course, elephants are popular.
Yes.
So there's kind of just these little pockets of interest that if and that one I just kind of stumbled on. But that's one where I really wouldn't think anybody's going to care, and then what do I know?
Well, you
really.
know what?
So
I have back in the 1980s. I'm going to say the 1980s. This is when Miami Beach used to have a lot of older people. Because remember, once upon a time, Miami Beach was really known for as a retiree kind of place. Before Miami Vice, before.
Yeah. Yes.
So they used to have a basically it wasn't an antique shop. It was a place where you would basically, like what you said, people would donate their furniture, or they would pick up
store.
Yeah, something like that. But
Thrift store.
they used to have a lot of old furniture. I don't know if it's because so many of the older people lived there that what they specialized in was actually furniture, like bedroom sets, tables.
Yeah.
And there was a really big space. They were known for you call them up, especially because it was heavy items, and they'd pick it up because they knew this for some people to. And I remember I bought a couple of tables there, but talk about unusual, weird feelings walking around there. That was one of those places that it was like every once in a while, you'd look over your shoulder and you'd be like, oh, God, what? And that happened to me because every once in a while I would go over there and, like I said, a couple of, there's only so much furniture you can buy, which is what they sold. But nice stuff, older stuff.
Yeah.
Really well made. And it was like, I'd be wandering around in there and, you're always poking, thinking behind there, I'm going to find the.
Yeah.
And it's, and sometimes, usually on the weekends, you had more people walking around in there. But if you went on the weekdays, it was kind of empty in the sense of you could be over here and then maybe there'd be another customer over there because it was a really big.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I went in there and after a while, and not all the time. But there were some days that I said, I'm leaving. And one time I remember I was looking at a coffee table, which I eventually bought. It was one of those rounded coffee tables. And remember, I bent over because it was low. And I felt like somebody touched the back of my thigh. Okay.
Interesting.
And it was like, I'm not against anything. I'm not, there's nothing. I remember I was like, when you straighten up, like, man, somebody touched me. And I was like, I left. And I came back that weekend later with my husband and I bought it. But yeah, it's really weird when you say the paranormal. It's not like in your face or weird. It's just that sometimes you get this feeling like I'm not by myself.
Yeah,
here.
It's very subtle, and I do think I totally get this in what we were talking about earlier with furniture. And again, if you think about like the amount of time someone spent, I'm not saying that your cocktail table, but with a piece of furniture, with again when I talk about a desk, sitting at that desk or sitting in that chair. Your furniture, you just kind of
I think people
bond
also
with
used to
it
keep
over
their
the
furniture
years.
longer too.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, that's the kind of comments that I would get too. I've had people say, and the other thing I've noticed is when I said about all the people who have had some type of experience, it's almost always a young girl, and they'll say somebody touched my hair.
There you go.
And I think it's a child. I think it's a young girl.
Okay.
And almost everybody. It's happened to me. It's happened to my store manager. He was funny. He completely would just think like baloney when people would tell him this. And he'd come downstairs and he'd say, "What do you want?" I'd say, "What?" And he says, "You called for me." I said, "I didn't call for you." That I've noticed. She'll call. She knows your name.
Right.
I get this little Duane. And I turn around and like, or hey.
Which, by the way, in the paranormal, that's an intelligent haunting. That's not a residual.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. That's what I mean. I think it's a young girl. I think she probably lived in that apartment when it was an apartment, and I think all these things coming in energizes her, and every once in a while, and it's always when someone's by themselves. Never a pair or a group of people like yourself. When you were by yourself and the place is empty, then they're comfortable enough to go and communicate.
Yep. Yes.
So,
yes.
and I think honestly, these things are lovely.
It wasn't a bad feeling.
No.
It's just that when you're by yourself and you feel like I'm not by myself.
No. And no, it was the same thing. I had two incidents. One was my name, and then the other one was that it sounded like a mirror fell off the wall, but like right next to me. So this horrible crash.
Okay.
I always say it was like that, or if like you had a big pile of keys in your hand and you threw them on a concrete floor and they were smashed. It was that. And then I jumped, and there's nothing fell off the wall, nothing. And I mean, I looked all over the place going, and I'm trying to convince myself that I'm missing something here, but it was just to get my attention.
Sure.
So I think that was probably just the most vivid. And again, this is of 20-some years that I've had two experiences, so I don't think that's a lot.
No, it's not.
But every time somebody asks me a question, I'm going, "Oh, here we go."
Well, in other words, yes, I've already heard some version of this already before.
Yes,
and like I said, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'll say, did it happen in the two little rooms above us? Yes. It's always, and very near this little corner. There's a little corner that just seems to be the spot. So, and I go, "Oh yeah," and it's fine. I've had people get upset. Scared. And others just going like, "Well, that was interesting."
Right. Well, because, and that in and of itself lends validity to it because, like you said, this is different people, different times, different.
Yeah.
And they don't go in there
There's
looking
no
for the
connection to one
experience.
another.
They're looking at antiques.
And I'm talking to you about this, but this is not something that I talk about. I don't promote. We don't have tours. You know what I'm saying?
Next thing,
we don't promote this.
Next thing you know, you get people calling you up. Hey.
Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned, and I've only mentioned since the book, and I don't write about it in the book. So this is just that's a kind of I've had some other personal experience that I can talk about, but it's that. To me, that's more of a public thing because it's happening to the public.
Right.
Yeah. But
I think that is so.
Marlene is selling dead people's things.
That is so interesting, Duane, and I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been great. I love those stories, and I've been showing. I'll have a link to your website on the credits of the show. But for my podcast listeners, what is your website address?
Oh, so it's sellingdeadpeoplesthings.com.
Okay, and I've had a slide going over showing the cover of the book. Okay, so people know what a groovy. I love the cover. Yeah.
And people can follow it on. There's a Facebook. There's a couple Facebook groups for it.
Oh, really?
For the book, and then there's for the readers. Somebody started a readers group.
Interesting.
For it, it's just selling dead people's things. And I want to give a shout out to. It was a complete female crew that pulled this book together for me.
Really? My
editors, my proofreaders, the cover art. There's six women got together and got me through this and made it what it is.
So are you going to do book 2?
I'm kicking it around. COVID kind of threw me off base because I just want to keep
Okay.
my business going, and I
Mm-hmm.
did, and that's great, and we're fine. Um, but yeah, I definitely have some ideas, and I've had a number of requests for it, and I'm kind of more open to it than I was, I think, a year ago. And again, talking to someone like you, it kind of energizes me that
Yes.
perhaps I should.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, it has been wonderful to speak to you, and I want to wish you the best of luck. And
Thank you, Brenda.
again, if you write another book or if not, because I'd love hearing those stories, I wish you would come back. But
I
either
would. I
way, I
would.
want to wish you the best of
Yeah.
luck.
Thank you. This has been a joy. I just had a great
Likewise.
time. You
Take
take
care.
care.
Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye bye.
Wow. Wow. Well, here we go. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, we had kind of a little bit the other system that I use, which is StreamYard. For some reason, it was not cooperating with his computer thingamajigger. That's why I don't have the camera version, like a for him talking. So I did the picture thing because it was like, okay, this is not working. Let's fall back on Plan B, which is the phone. Let's get back to basics. But anyway, I think it's such a great idea. The stories are fantastic, and I'm sure he's got. I'm sure if he's got after 30 some years of doing this work, I'm sure has a lot of stories. And like I said, you know what? Sometimes you have stories that are very, very much obvious that they're paranormal in nature, and then you got other things that are really subtle, and they're not like in your face, but you're like I said, when I used to go to this, basically it was like I want to say like a thrift store, back in the '80s, Miami Beach. This was when Miami Beach had a lot of older people. A lot of older people lived in the beach, and again, which is what I said. Also, this was around the time period furniture was well made, and people kept their furniture for years and years and years and years. Okay, so and the point I'm getting to is that a lot of the furniture that ended up there used to come from people dying and the families. If they lived in another state, they would come and they would just sell everything inside the house, including all the furniture. So you would have a lot of beautiful pieces, by the well, very well taken care of. So this thrift store, they were huge. They had a big area. This was not like a little. No, as a matter of fact, I don't think they even had clothing. I think they were strictly just furniture. And sometimes I would go in there just to browse because let's face it, how much furniture? I mean, you can only like. But sometimes I would go there and see, just to see if I can come across something, and I, like you said, when I was alone, because sometimes on the weekends I would be with my husband or my mom would go with me, and it was just different. The vibe was different. There was more people walking around, and there was a couple of times I was like, oh man, my imagination's running away with me. Hmm. And you know what? It's really funny because people say, back in those days, this was, I tell everybody, the 80s was my baby producing decade. And as anybody will tell you, when you have children, especially all back to back, like you grow eyes in the back of your head. In other words, your senses are like to the nth degree because you're always listening, like because you're trying to multitask. You're listening, your kid, and then. So I don't know if at that time I was more hypersensitive. By this, I don't mean I was hearing things that weren't there, but I was picking up on stuff just because I was doing it all the time because I had small children. So I know that there were times that I was like, man, you'd see me, I'd be like, I wouldn't do one of these whip around things like, what was there? But because I felt stupid because it's almost like quiet, you know, and I'd do one of these like, I'm looking at that piece of furniture over there. But really what I was doing was I was trying to look behind me in this big space behind me because I felt like somebody was looking at me from behind there somewhere. Okay, so I'd be like, no, there's nobody there. And then, of course, every once in a while, you would hear somebody talking, and they'd come way on the other side of this place. It's like, and they really didn't have a bunch of employees running around. They had employees usually like towards the front where you paid, and if you needed help, you'd go over there and you say, hey, look, can you help me load this, or how much, whatever. But you really didn't have all these employees running around. So that's what I'm saying. There wasn't that many people around, and there were days where there was nothing, and then there were other days where it's like, man, I'm leaving because I feel like somebody's got like eye on me. And you'd walk away and you'd be like, and then you'd be looking at stuff, and what ended up happening is it became so distracting. It was like, I'm not enjoying this. I'm not enjoying my shopping moment, and I would leave. I would leave. And there was another time that I went to. This was an antique stop, an antique store. This was again in the 80s, and it was the lady. The lady originally was from Philadelphia. She had moved down here, and she had had this shop for years and years. What she had was she had taken she was like in one of these older strip malls, and she had taken up two shops. In other words, she had knocked down the wall between what would have been two shops, and she had everything there. Had a bunch of stuff, furniture, painting, bric-a-brac. And I remember we would talk a lot. And when sometimes I would go over there every once in a while. Because she was real close to my job. And I would get out at 5, and this was around the winter time, where by 6:30 it's dark. And the reason why I'm saying this is, again, let me go back to when you have little kids, you don't go to antique stores. Don't. It's like, yeah. So what I would do is I would stop every once in a while. After I got out of work, I'd zoom by there real quick and just talk to her. And, oh, what do you got? We just chit-chat a minute, and I keep going because that was my only time when I was sans children. So I remember one time, it was already, and she was like, she said, "Oh, stay with me. I'm closing up," because she usually had another employee that worked there with her, but that person was gone. And she says, "Oh, just wait for me, and I'm gonna pick up everything." And she had turned off the lights on the other side of the store, and she only had like a couple of lights on over. Like, in other words, it was like, if anybody stops by, this place is closed. And I'm just there, and she's puttering around, and she's getting her stuff ready, and all of a sudden I hear something. She had stuff like paintings and things hung up on the wall, on the on those walls on the side, and all of a sudden I'm sitting and something falls falls off. And I remember I looked at her and she looked at me, and I'm because remember, this place is empty. There's no customers. There's no other. There's nothing else. There's no wind. There's no air conditioning. There's nothing. There's no vibration. There's no somebody moved a piece of furniture that moved this, and then that made that fall. I remember I looked at her and she looked at me, and she's like, "Oh, it's that picture again." I was like, "That picture again? What do you mean, that picture again?" I was like 23, 20. I was young. I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah." She comes out from behind this desk, her thing. She waddles over. She's a chubby little lady. Real sweetheart, though. She goes in and she makes her way through this thing, and she pulls up this picture. It was like about like this. It was oval. All right. And I imagine it was a reproduction. It was like, the times. It was like a painting of a young girl, like a young woman, and the way she was dressed, it looked like it was like the style of dress, like from Pride and Prejudice, like 1800s Edwardian times. The under the okay, that kind of. So it was a reproduction. I'm sure it wasn't an original, but it had the cold frame on it. I was like, "Oh, it's." She does this one of those size things, like, yeah. And I go, and I'm thinking, okay, you're gonna tell me why this thing fell off the wall? And she goes, "No, I don't. I just don't know what to." And I think it was. But she used to have a guy that used to go out sometimes, like what Duane was saying. I don't think it was her husband, but it was a family member, somebody who would on the weekends go to garage sales and different places and estate sales, and he would pick up all these items if he found anything and bring them back In other words, the guy was doing the legwork, and basically he bought this picture. And she says, like, I don't even know where he got it from. He just bought it and she goes and she tells me that happens all the time. Whoever stays here behind by themselves closing up, that thing falls off. They hear weird noises. She'd had one girl that she would bring in like during the summer who like ran out, like she says she heard somebody whispering. Which reminded me of his story of the employees come running screaming from the basement. And it was, when you looked at it, it was just this pretty girl with this little ribbon in her hair, and she had this dress, and it was like this, and it's very, I want to say, for lack of a better, it wasn't like an unusual picture. It was just like if you were gonna decorate your house in that style, you'd hang that. And she goes, and it's just, I don't know what it is. And I said, but is it always that picture? Because I'm thinking maybe there's something in here that, she goes, it's always that picture. And I said, well, maybe it's, she goes, nope. Tried hooking it. I've tried hanging it in other spots. She says, I thought at the beginning it was for some reason the way that it hooked. She goes, it's gone around the walls here where I hang stuff. It's made the rounds. And she says, and it always usually happens at the end of the day, like when somebody's leaving and it's quiet like this. In other words, oh, you mean that they want to make sure that you realize that this... She goes, no, it won't happen in the middle of the day. It won't happen when there are customers there. She goes, the only thing I've had is that a couple of people tell me, hey, that picture, the eyes follow me around. And I said, well, maybe it's one of those, that on purpose they were painted to have, the subject of the painting that they're following you with their eyes. She goes, no, it's not painted that way. And I looked at it. Sure enough, it wasn't. And she goes, more than one person has come up to me and said, hey, that painting. She's like, she would act like dumb. Which painting? That painting. The painting. Its eyes are following me around. She'd be like, really? I hadn't noticed that. And I never forgot that story. I never forgot that story. Because when, and of course, by comparison, this lady had a small business compared to Duane. But it was one of those things where it's like, and it was a nice piece. It was like, but knowing what I did, it was like, no, I'm not going to find out, what's going on with that. But anyway, and there's my story, my paranormal story for the day. Again, guys, if you want to get links to any of the episodes, whether it's on videos, on a podcast platform, I'm all over the place. But if you specifically have certain podcast platforms that you use, I have links to all of that on the website, miamighostchronicles.com. If you want to listen to any of the shows, whether it's Stories of the Supernatural, Nightshade Diary, or Supernatural Storytime, you can go to each website, and I have links to the actual MP3 files without commercial interruption, where you could either download the MP3 file or you can just click it and listen to it like on the browser, and you don't have to listen to any commercial interruptions, because this is what happens when some of the episodes go through different podcast platforms, is that then they you get the advertising. And again, if you have stories, if you have any recommendation for guests, Marlene at miamighostchronicles.com. I have great guests lined up, and hopefully I will be able to take pictures of the chicks, and I just don't want to, I don't know, that's a weird experience I had there. But anyway, and again, the book is in progress. I'm hoping that by September I'm going to be releasing that film noir murder number 2. And I've had a lot of requests that people say, oh, why don't you do shows about some of these old time murder stories, these old time true crime, unsolved whatever stories, because it's great, because sometimes I don't have time to read. I don't have time to read, and if you I want you to talk about them, because I like to listen to them, or see the video. So I'm going to be trying to work that in somehow into the episodes between, the guests and things like that. So again, guys, I want to thank you for coming back every week and spending this time with me. You're all wonderful, and I do truly appreciate the time that you spend with me. So take care and see you next week.